First of all, I want to welcome everybody and thank you for participating this afternoon in the town's roundtable discussion on continuing care retirement communities and senior housing options. Before we get started, I'd like to make some introductions, starting with Mayor Scott Lamar, Councilmember David Scherf, we have Councilmember Dan Schweiker, Councilmember Paul Dembo, and I believe Vice Mayor Collins is on his way. And I don't believe Councilmember Kirby is able to make it, or Councilmember Trump. I'd also like to introduce our guest speakers this afternoon. I understand Sheriff Harper had a conflict and is not able to attend this afternoon, but we do have Jonathan Stelter with us from the Plaza Companies. John brings over 20 years of project management and construction expertise to Plaza Companies, with responsibilities for construction services, for commercial office, medical office, and senior living. The project oversight ranges for direct responsibility for the $231 million V at Silverstone, to new commercial construction, tenant improvements, and capital improvements. Next, we have Gary Todd, the founding principal of Todd & Associates. He has 30 years of design and leadership experience since founding the firm in 1981. He has played a role in the development of numerous highly successful projects throughout the country, whether it's an existing CCRC, expanding its continuum of care, a new senior living community, or any specialized healthcare facility. Todd & Associates strive to bring new and innovative solutions to redefining senior living. Projects include Sagewood, the retreat at Desert Cove, the Village Agatio, Royal Oaks Life Care Community, Hawthorne Court, our TP, and the Heritage Campus. Next, we have Mr. Eric Johnston. He established Retirement Community Specialist in 1990. Retirement Community Specialist is a unique senior living community management company that provides multiple levels of senior-related services to the senior living industry, including development, market feasibility, and architectural interface, and all operational capabilities. RCS currently manages the Springs of Scottsdale, Alta Vista and Adult Care Services in Prescott, and Generations at Agritopia will be opening in 2014. And last but not least, we have Mr. Jay Valenzuela. He's currently developing a 90-bed assisted living project in the town of Goodyear, which is based on a new model, a green or home model of retirement communities. It's called the Pathways Assisted Living and Memory Care, and it features 9 10-bedroom homes that is connected by walkways and outdoor spaces. Site improvements are underway, and I believe vertical construction is going to begin next month. And they also operate a 108-bed facility in Tucson. I'd also like to introduce Jim Bacon, our town manager, and Mr. Andrew Miller, our town attorney. And real quickly, I would like to just give a little bit of background, just for some context for the discussion. You may recall that the town's 2012 general plan includes a policy that states that we'll have a community-wide discussion about whether what types of senior living options are appropriate for the town, where they might be appropriate. And we've had 2 work study discussions so far in February and April to start that discussion. At our last work study session in April, staff and the council agreed to have this roundtable discussion with some experts to address some of the council's concerns regarding the physical and operational aspects of these types of facilities. I do want to inform everyone that this week we have received 2 major general plan amendment applications. One is a text amendment to create a new general plan land use category for continuing care retirement communities. And the second is a map amendment to apply that land use designation to. So with that being said, today's discussion is particularly important considering the land use decisions that the town will be facing in the coming months. Our guests have provided a list of questions that were also attached to the agenda. These questions were submitted by council members and staff. And these are broken down by category in terms of financing, design, and traffic. So unless anyone would like to begin with a question that's not on the list, I suggest that we start with the first question on the list and let our panelists address the questions and go from there and just have a nice informal dialogue. Okay? So the first question on the list, and I think everyone on the panel has had an opportunity to look at the questions. But the council's had some concerns about the various financial arrangements and trying to understand the way that these different businesses are set up. So if one of you or all of you could address the various financial arrangements for CCRCs, for example, for sale versus for lease product.
Well, I'd like to add something to that. That was one of my questions. More than financial arrangements, I think we'd like to explore how can the town benefit financially from this type of development. In other words, by granting resort style density at FAR, what kind of alternative models have worked in other communities where there's revenue generated on behalf of the town?
And Mr. Mayor, if I can add on to that, because the business model that we have one industry, I don't know how well you know the town of Paradise Valley, which is resorts. And then the way we have either a bed tax or an in lieu fee if the resort's going to build some residential. So keep that in your thought process.
Well, I don't know who wants to jump in, but to kind of respond to that question, in our independent living communities, the resident pays a sales tax, which we then collect and pass on to the city of Scottsdale or whatever jurisdiction.
On a monthly basis?
Mm-hmm. If you are dealing with assisted living or residential memory care, that particular category is exempt from sales tax. So those residents would not pay sales tax.
So sales tax is for unassisted living.
Right. Independent living, more synonymous with multifamily housing, but they also have services attached to it as well.
And is your product for lease only?
Yes. My case, John's got the light here.
Well, let's ask that question. I'll do it on behalf of everyone. Are most all of the different types of products that the four of you represent would be for lease product?
Okay. No, most of our communities, their residents sign a life care contract, and then it's a contract that they put money up front, and the estate gets a percentage in return depending on the contract that they sign. It could be a 90% return, 10% return, 50%. But that's then with that upfront money. That's how our model is that. That's what we use to help pay off the construction loan, so we can get debt free as quickly as possible. And then, but with this life care contract, our residents are guaranteed a spot till throughout the rest of their life. So if they're in the independent living and something happens to themselves or a spouse, if they're on the contract, they can go into the skilled or the assisted living, and they have guaranteed a price or a place.
All the way out.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't own the unit. They just.
It's a lease. No, they don't get a deed or anything like that. No.
John, I know that in Peoria, a number of years ago, when Freedom Plaza was constructed, there was an audit, and I think a tax assessment resulted where there was eventually a 35% standard deduction. So I think all the dollars coming in that were not refunded were treated as a lease of real property. Is that still the case in Peoria?
I really don't know. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think our model's maybe a little bit different too, in the sense that it's a little bit smaller. It's a little more focused on just the assisted living and the memory care piece. There's smaller units of 10-bedroom homes that we sign a rental agreement, month-to-month rental agreement. There's no lease or anything like that. It's a for lack of better term, it's called a rental model. And it's probably, we have 3 different levels of care. We'll do an initial evaluation on each potential resident and establish what they need in terms of the depth of their care. And the price ranges anywhere from probably $4,000 a month up to behavioral care and memory care up in the maybe the high 5s. 5,000.
So would that be comparable to Mr. Johnson's model where unassisted living, be straight rent agreement, and there'd be sales tax, and be transaction privilege tax, and then, so it's consistent with when you have managed care, there is no tax, that's a tax exempt
Yeah,
transaction?
we don't have a sales tax associated with it. It's like an apartment rental or something like that on a month-to-month basis. Probably the benefits that come out of that are 60 full-time jobs with one of our facilities, and you know, on average, probably about a $9 million construction project.
So Jay, I've got a question on that. Like this one you're doing in Goodyear, ballpark, what size is a 10-bedroom house?
68 to 7,000 square feet.
Okay.
Each bedroom is about 300 square feet. There's a common living area, common kitchen. There are rooms set aside for multi-purposes, birthday parties, family meetings, consultations with various people. We've got a flex room that we can convert into a salon or a exercise area, card room, things like that. But under roof, it's about under 7,000 square feet.
So
Each home.
I think one of the things you're hearing, we ought to make sure you totally understand. Paradise Valley does not have a property tax, so we don't benefit from any of that. So for the town to get money, if something's put on a SUP property, which is our zoning definition, we collect an in lieu fee that usually, in regards to resorts, would be the equivalent of what we would be collecting as bed tax. So if somebody needs, you know, for sale property in order to make the project feasible, since, you know, most hotels can't make it just off of your room charges, then for the privilege of doing that, we collect an in lieu fee that would equal the bed tax ballpark.
I don't know about your guys' models, but with ours, it's pretty flexible up front. We established the pricing project to project, so I don't think it would be an issue to have something like that in place. It would be something that we would put in our contract with our residents. I'm not sure how you know what the reaction would be there, but I think there's a lot of flexibility in the setup of probably any of these models.
And this is just kind of a general question. When someone is determining that they're going to go into one of these, to me there's 4 areas: location, facilities, services, and price. Is there something I'm missing when people make a decision? And in today's environment, what is the most important when someone is choosing one of these facilities?
I would say what we deal with first are the children of somebody that's
Family members.
We very rarely do we deal with somebody who's taken themselves into the system.
Right, so that would make location.
Location is probably prime.
Okay.
What we find is that children who are looking for a place for their parents want them to be close. The number we use is within 5 miles, more like probably 3 to 5.
Okay.
And I would also say price is the driving factor too. Number one factor.
The buy-in price or the monthly price?
The monthly price, but I would say the number one factor above all that is the care.
Services.
The medical care, the safety of the residents, the caretakers, their state licensure, their track record. It's definitely the care, from what I've experienced, is number one consideration.
And I would say, you know, when you move to the independent living model, which I responded to, that has its sales tax features to it, so to speak. The care doesn't exist, so you know they certainly want quality care and service to be available, but they need to be comfortable with either location, amenities, atmosphere, quality of life, things that are going to make them comfortable and allows them to have a vibrant independent living lifestyle. What we're really seeing, though, I'd say 10 years ago, if I was answering this question, you'd see very, very little in-migration and movement into a community. It's that 3 to 5 mile. You've got to hit your demographics within 3 to 5, or you're in trouble in terms of absorption. Today, we're seeing a migration from interstate, out-of-state, across town, Peoria to Scottsdale. They're looking, they're shopping, they're comparing, they're smarter. But probably the biggest change we're seeing is they want to see a continuum of care. If they're buying IL or independent living, they want to know that memory care is going to be there if mom or dad needs it. They don't want to go through it again. And if you don't have that memory care component in your campus, they're going to look somewhere else. Unless you are very, very, very strong in terms of price or reputation, or they know someone's sitting there.
That goes along with all the independent being relicensed right now for assisted.
Yeah, and they're looking at that. So if it used to be you do independent and you could build it, the Springs of Scottsdale was built independent 24 years ago and was very, very successful. Then along came assisted living. We did a retrofit of assisted living because the residents didn't want to have to leave when the time came to be in need of care and service. Now you're seeing a more complex request being made for the presence of memory care, so they don't have to leave when they go through assisted and get to the memory care piece. And then the kids on the front end selection process, what's important is the presence of your product line. You know, it's kind of like if IL is all you have to do. Now I've got to go through this again for assisted. I've got to go through it again for memory care. That dog doesn't hunt well for it. They really want to see the provider to be able to provide it.
So are you saying that you need to have all, in today's model, to be really financially successful and have longevity, you need to have all three levels of care available to keep from having transitory nature of someone moves into an active senior living environment, now they have to go someplace else?
I think it's a strong element of success for today and for the next decade. I think that you'll have providers that will do very well. They don't have that model. They have IL and AL, or they have AL and memory care, or they may try to find some pseudo version of independent living and call it independent. The customer, you know, they're looking for what it is that they want to buy, and they don't always see themselves the way the industry presents products. You know, a 75-year-old person doesn't see themselves as 75.
I think people are living longer, so
Yeah,
you're absolutely
exactly.
correct.
So, yeah, that's what's bringing a lot of the complexity to the conclusion of, it used to be an 84-year-old resident was for sure assisted living. Today, our average age in Scottsdale is 84.7. And that's IL, AL combined. So what I like to say is like, what condition is your condition in when you hit that mid-80 mark? Are you vibrant and play tennis and play golf and want to live independent? Do you have memory care issues or cognitive things that have to be addressed? Or you find cognitively that you've got physical challenges? So that they're getting to be happy living under the same roof today, whereas 10 years ago, that model didn't exist. So I think that's what I'm trying to say, is there's kind of a blending of
Can I ask John a question? John, at Freedom Plaza and B, I understand there's three different levels of care: assisted, independent, and what is the third level?
Skilled.
Skilled. Skilled is,
Oh,
when you say life
you're
care,
in-
that's,
Like, let's say, I believe you took a tour from our Silverstone
right.
facility. I think I was with you there, and, you know, out at Silverstone, we have roughly 270 units out there. We have a mixture of villas, and then about 67 villas, and then 207 units independent living. Then we have a skilled assisted living and memory support facility right on campus too. So, I mean, so with that, if one of your spouse or somebody, you know, does get ill, they need that, you're still within the complex. And one thing I wanted to add, at least in our facility, in the independent area, we do put in motion detectors, or in other facilities that I've built, we do put in some kind of check-in device if a resident that's in a independent area hasn't checked in by a certain time, if they're either pushing a button or detecting some kind of movement, the front desk does go check up on them, and that's a nice selling tool. That it's a comfort level for your kids or to feel comfortable, because you never know when someone at this age does fall or something could happen.
And in independent living would that be like a hotel? How fully serviced is it?
I call it like a Silverstone, like a cruise ship on the desert.
Okay.
Because
You can get room service,
you can.
Yep.
It depends. You get a monthly charge. You can get different types of meal plans within the facility. We have different restaurants. I'm sure Jerry can explain more on the design, but we do have a lounge, a multi-purpose room, an exercise facility, indoor-outdoor pools, a beauty salon. We have a wellness center. So, I mean, a resident doesn't have to leave if they don't want to. But, we do provide them services for transportation also. We, buses and like a town car to take a resident either as a big group to a baseball game, Diamondbacks game, or they just have a doctor's appointment. A town car can take them there.
Sagewood Senior Living, just west of the Music Instruments Museum, is a larger project than that, but it's 82 acres. But it is the same 5 uses that you outlined, and you just start with concentric rings, if you can imagine that, and starting way out here with your casitas and working your way in through independent, assisted, skilled care, and then you work your way into that. As you get closer to the heart of the facility, you
Gary,
can
can
hear
you
what these.
articulate for somebody like myself that doesn't know the difference between with assisted and skilled care?
Well, yes, I actually, he's better than I am, but.
You got it wrong, but I heard you mention it, so
I'd like to be able to give you, I think I gave Molly an outline of a definition of each of these uses that we're talking about.
That would be great.
Really
I'd
be
like to
good
understand
if
that
each of you had that,
Yes.
because sometimes when we start talking, and we'll get later into some of the size of the parcels that you're talking about, 5-acre parcel with a CCRC, just that whole discussion we need to have. You're going to see a lot of shaking of heads. I don't think so. So, how those terms get used is very important. So, I think I'd like to see you be able to get a copy of this and look at all the definitions of each of the levels of care.
I appreciate that.
I think
I'll
Molly
email
has
that to all the council members after the
Thank
meeting.
you.
I think what you're describing is kind of the niche or the offshoot that created a business like ours. And I do still sense that there's a little bit of a chasm between the independent living and assisted and beyond. And that's demonstrated in a few different ways. When I go in to try to develop a property and it's anywhere near an independent living facility, first thing I do is I get a call from somebody that says, we're golf and tennis. We're not walkers and wheelchairs, and we sort of want you a little further away. Now, if it's not developed all together in a whole continuum, I think that works well. But for somebody that's just assisted and beyond, that business model can still work really well. If somebody, like Eric says, somebody has to be searching for assisted and beyond. We strive very hard to keep, after you're in assisted living, that continuum whole, all the way from assisted to memory care and behavior care, even through hospice care. But there is still, I think, a pretty sizable gap between assisted living and independent living.
If you don't mind me reading a little paragraph here real quick, it
No, we
kind of
can-
explains.
we're here to learn.
assisted. Okay, but I'm sure it'll help you to have this. It says an assisted living facility is a residential care institution that provides or contracts to provide supervisory care, personal care, or directed care. There's 3 levels of care in assisted living on a continuing basis. Types of assisted living facilities include adult foster care homes where care is provided for up to 4 people in the home in which the caregiver lives, assisted living homes would provide for care up to 10 people, and assisted living centers would provide care for 11 or more people. And then there's 3 levels of care. There's supervisory care, personal care and directed care. Directed care is what we all know as memory.
All defined by the state, by the way.
Yes, these are state definitions,
Federal.
and when we get to that directed, we're talking about memory care. So,
And independent is an unlicensed product unto itself.
assistance
You
license.
can open an independent living community and not go to the state, just get your certificate of occupancy and open your doors and post your rents and you're open for business. And it could be with meals or it could be with no meals if you really had an unbundled building. That part of the product is wide open. When you get to assisted, then you've got to go through the licensing process with the Department of Health Services and then march to the tune of their definitions and manage your community by their definitions.
There's something called an activity or like daily activities that are commonly known in the industry. I think there's 7 of them. And they're things like taking your medications, getting dressed, hygiene. When you start to, those are kind of the symptoms or the signs of needing assisted living when you start to need assistance with any of those ADLs. That's typically when, and those signs are obvious. Those signs are obvious to family members or spouses that, and usually by the time we get interest in our facility, someone that requires assisted living is in definite need of care. They've exceeded the level of care that the spouse can provide or the family can provide, or much different than independence.
I think at least with our facilities, our plan is, as they sign a contract, each of the residents do have to take a physical, so they do get evaluated. And with that, that would, if there is something that they need a little extra attention to, that's when it comes out. And then, one spouse may be able to go into the independent, one needs a little help. But then also, the staff is pretty well trained to notice these signs if a deterioration has started. So, then, that gets taken to, the staff upper levels to evaluate and talk to the family, usually.
This sounds like it's going to be a different answer from your model and maybe not from the other gentleman here, but question number 3, the smallest number of units economically feasible, what is the average land cost per unit, et cetera, and does PV make sense for, because you guys all seem to think that 5-acre deal was, you guys were not nodding your head up and down like that'd be the place you want to open up shop tomorrow.
Well, 5 acres works for our model. I mean, our project in Agritopia there in Gilbert is right at 5 acres.
Okay.
It's our sweet spot.
Yeah, 118 units of residents, and that's a mixture of independent living, assisted living, residential memory care.
And how tall is that, 118 units?
118 units.
How tall? Is that
2-story?
2-story.
And that was kind of a self-imposed restriction, I think.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson, what would your split be, those 118 units? They're not all going to be identical type of units. Some are going to look like a hospital room, and some are going to look like an apartment. Or no?
I would say all of them are going to look like an apartment. We try to take the institutional.
All of them will have
model out
a
of it.
kitchen.
Right, no skilled care.
The memory care would not have kitchens, just because it would present problems. But independent living, our model of ILAL is what we call an integrated model, where we present, say, a standard 1-bedroom accommodation, maybe 710 square feet, with a full kitchen, laundry, washer and dryer, 1-bedroom, living room, and that can be either occupied by an independent living person or an assisted living person. Or they can come in independent and as they need more care and service, we'll bring it to them instead of saying you now need to move. That's just our model, our way of approaching, their needs and try to meet their needs without them having to relocate.
So in your case, you don't have independent living, you have assisted living.
No, it's independent. We can have people occupying their
Independent and assisted, but you don't do memory care.
At Agritopia, we will have a memory care component, and then that building is separate from the independent because of the licensing requirements.
Memory care is probably the fastest growing segment of all these care areas.
So when I see this building under construction, 4 stories on 32nd Street, in like Campbell, there's Morningstar, memory care.
Glen Rosa.
So that's, I don't know, that looks like maybe 180, 100 rooms. So that would all be strictly memory care.
I think someone
They're
here
here,
can help you.
they can give you the exact number.
110. It's 110 units.
Okay, good guess.
There's 80 assisted living and 30 memory care.
80 assisted living and 30 memory care. What does that ratio mean? Is that based on experience?
Usually memory care, they don't put them into slots. You know, you figure between 16 to 20 is the most usable number of units that you can manage with the central nurses station. So usually if you have 30 units, you split them up into 2 pods of 15 or 6.
This doesn't have anything to do with state ratios or licensing
No.
rates.
And this, can you
The
say my
most you
name?
can effectively manage
I
with
see.
labor and everything, and it also looks at the amount of assisted living. There's a certain percentage of people that in assisted living typically get dementia as they age in place. Sorry, I'm Stephanie Anderson.
What? Are you with?
I'm not with
Oh.
them. I just moved here. I was the chief acquisitions officer with Healthcare REIT, which is a $30 billion company that does seniors housing, skilled nursing, and assisted living and independent living. I just quit and I'm doing a development over in Peoria with Silverado, Alzheimer's, and doing more of my own thing now. Before that, I was with GE Capital, managing director of equity over all their healthcare real estate. So I've got a really broad national base. I mean, I did $10 billion with Healthcare REIT the last 2 years of acquisitions and good operators. That's what makes the difference between a successful project and a bad project. It's just really all about the operations and finding the right amount of assisted versus independent living and really, you know, what it is that your actual residents want and need. And definitely the CCRCs are probably more of what you think of when you think of Paradise Valley, but it really, you know, the entrance fee CCRCs has some risk to them simply because of the fact that there's risk of bankruptcy of the ultimate, you know, not-for-profit there. So I could talk all day on it, but
Well,
that's
if
who
you
I am.
manage $10 billion in assets for GE Capital, who I'm very familiar with, the business model that our town has is basically either an in lieu fee or a bed tax, where we have some additional, you know, so we can get coverage of why we report to the town. Would that work in the business models that we're contemplating?
Yeah.
I think a bigger question is, do your models work if dirt's costing you, give or take, $1 million an acre?
Mine doesn't.
It works if you can find someone that's willing to pay what it takes to advertise that and mortgage and all the facilities, but that's good enough area. I don't know what your real price point would be with that kind of a land cost. I was just calculating, we're in the dirt there at Agritopia at $13,000 a door. So, so maybe
That'd
that'd
be
be
a good ballpark, Scott. That's,
Yeah.
give or take a little bit, we're about $1 million an acre.
Gary, I have been out to Sagewood before, visiting a friend of mine. That is how many units?
Well,
Independent living.
298 today. That's first phase. It's going to be 875 independent units.
For those of you who may or may not have been out there, it's like deluxe condo. Really nice inside. When you're buying them new, the life estate, you can, accessorize them however you like. A lot of them are 398.
Today,
We'll say
yes.
300. Now, so that's units. When you go to assisted living, you start talking about beds, or you still talking about units?
Units.
Okay.
So for 800 units, how big is that piece of property?
Well, again, the property will eventually have 875 independent units, 63 assisted, 120 skilled, and 30 memory care.
what's the land?
82 acres.
82 acres.
And John, what's Silverstone?
44.
We don't have those type parcels.
Well, I think that's part of, let me just
That's
say-
part of our education.
Well, part of what's going on is we may be misusing the word CCRC. We may,
Right.
I think that's somewhat of a limiting factor.
What we do is we put together every project at the beginning, if someone comes to us to develop or we're developing, we'll put together a market feasibility study. The first step is, it's called a snapshot. It's a down and dirty feasibility study that gets done. It looks at market analysis, demographics, the existing areas, as usually done in a 5 or 10 mile radius. It's a quick study. It's basically it's a go or no go. And if it's a go, then you go into more of an in-depth market feasibility study. And that will tell you, incomes, population. It tells you that also it rates what's in the area. It can help you with numbers, how many units would support that area in that land area. It helps you with pricing. So that's our model is, go or no go, and a lot of banks will require this before you get financing.
Mr. Johnson, your project, you said 118 units on 5 acres, roughly 2 stories. And we don't have zoning above 2 stories.
Yeah.
So that's roughly 72,000 square feet just built, just the units, right? 600 square feet per
The
unit?
total project's 155,000.
Okay, so you got 72,000 feet of living, so you've got another 72,000 support facilities. So it's almost, is that kind of one-to-one support facilities to units? Just trying to get an idea of density, mass, and that kind of stuff.
30% to 50%
30
for common
would be
space.
common, 30 to 50% would be more traditional common area space as a ratio to total.
Like however much
Yeah,
you use
that
for
was
the
one of your
per
questions
resident
under
rooms.
design number 6.
You take
and,
it, if the resident has
Depending
a
on the type
resident
of
room,
facility,
600
it's
square
really
feet.
going to be 30.
At 300
As you
square
get into,
feet.
when we started working on
Common space, which
Sagewood,
would be
the goal was
dining
40%.
at 10
But we ended up pushing that into the mid-40s by the time we were done with it, because that property is highly amenitized. And so that number.
And that's what the market wants, highly amenitized.
On that type of product, you get into another type of product. I think, I'm going to point to Scott here for a second. Did you not work on the one down the old Bud Rollins farm?
We did.
And that would be a much lower percentage of common space than, say, a Sagewood.
Yes, it would be. But one thing that needs to also be identified is circulation versus common space.
Yeah, right. Big difference. You got hallways and service areas, and kitchens and laundries and service areas that shoot a lot of square footage.
I want to ask one question. You would not call that a CCRC?
No, because when we built it, it was independent living, and then we licensed some aspects of assisted living. Yeah, but I would not. Again, I'm Scott Layton. I apologize. I'm with Red Group. There becomes, when you go into skilled nursing, it's a different level. It suddenly takes on more of a hospital type presence with it. So when we look at independent living, we look at assisted living, and then within assisted living, the memory care. Those components are all, one is not regulated, which you pointed out, the independent living, and the other two are regulated in a certain category. When we go into skilled nursing, then there's oxygen, there's different types of medications and different levels of care.
Different types of construction.
Different types of construction, and that resembles more of almost a hospital type, and I don't mean a steer like that, but the services that are provided are much greater than we would see in assisted living.
I only ask you that as a loaded question in that we have categorized all these as CCRCs, and they're not all CCRCs, and as we look at the sizes of parcels, you may not be trying to put a CCRC on all of those different sizes of parcels.
So talk to us more about that. You made an earlier comment that we may be using a term that's unnecessarily limiting by referring to all this as CCRC.
Well, the example that Scott just gave you is not a CCRC. but yet it might be something that's very viable in Paradise Valley.
What was the acreage volume on that? Do you remember?
At La Cienna?
La Cienna.
5.5 acres.
There you go, there's one of your sites is right there.
And that was 190 units on 5.5 acres, and that was all 4-story. But they were averaging 800.
And so if we're,
Bigger apartments.
if we're speaking industry speak, a CCRC needs to be what? Make sure the group understands. I mean, what components need to be on a
To me, a CCRC, if someone says I'm developing a CCRC, I would expect them to roll out independent living, assisted living, memory care, and then if it's rental, maybe skilled nursing component. If it's life care, it has to have a skilled nursing component to it.
Okay.
I think you, because you're under the Department of Insurance, right? Yeah, so I think it's a little different regulatory perception of it. Steph, you think?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. It's gotta have the skilled nursing
Yeah.
part.
Okay.
And students.
Gary, can you talk about how vertical movement helps with hallway lengths and travel distances from an architectural standpoint? And why, instead of building a 1-story garden, the travel distances for seniors?
And that was one of the questions, number 7, that was asked. If you jump around in the list volume a little bit, that, you know, the verticality. And what Scott's referring to, of course, we want to minimize the distance to the common amenities. And that's why you see a lot of times, you go to a lot of these senior living projects, you see X shape, you see all sorts of shapes where we're trying to get people horizontally to an elevator and drop them down into that common space. And that goes contrary to staying 2 floors. Because when you start running horizontally on this, it also goes contrary to maximizing land to your comment about $1 million an acre. So the two stories becomes a real challenge because it works contrary to the product type and the functionality that Scott's talking about, and it also works against the land cost.
I just did some quick math, and if it was 5.5 acres and there were about 800 square foot a unit, and you have to double that for the other stuff, that would be over 100%.
Yeah, they are.
Over 100%.
I mean, the most expensive one that's getting built today is in Turtle Creek, Dallas, which is by Belmont Senior Living, and they're right around $700,000 a unit. But they're going to have to charge rates of about $15,000 to $17,000 a month to make it work. When you start going to, they also, Belmont is a very high end. They just did one in Beverly Hills that opened 3 years ago that I just bought it at Healthcare REIT, and we bought it for about almost $1 million a unit. But I mean, they spent like $600,000 or $700,000 and had a long process on it. But the rents, it all depends what the goal is in Paradise Valley and having this. I mean, you could do some sort of. I don't think every resident in Paradise Valley is affluent, even though there's a lot of them. But as you start getting older and people are spending down their wealth, you might want to think about doing, you know, a tax credit product for some the independent, because your 5-mile ring, the income will be so high, you could get a nice affordable product where you could assist the developer in doing that with independent living, and then have an AL complement on the site. So you would, by nature, kind of form your own, you know, CCRC, but doing it with different sites within the community and not trying to group it all together. So, I mean, there are places, I'm going to see a site next week in Santa Barbara, similar to Paradise Valley. And, you know, the price per unit, the way we talk about it is you look at the land price, and you look at how many units you can build on it, knowing that if you're going to be an ALZ, you probably don't want to break 120 just because of the, you know, just the flow and the way it takes to run the facility. Your next break would be 150. Once you start getting in the 180s, it gets a little bit high and you need to go to the CCRC. But, you know, you kind of have to see what you can build on it, and 20,000 people are comfortable with in a very affluent community where you can charge really good rates, you know, around 10,000, but when, you know, if you're getting up to 60,000 a unit, you know, that's a lot.
When we pointed out the land cost, just because we're not involved with that, but that's just what, you know, ballpark a piece of dirt costs in TV now. Let me ask you another question, a little bit off some of this, but the parcels that we have available for doing something like this, most of them are part of parcels that would also be a resort entity. Do those two play well together, or don't they play well together? Do you have any experience with that?
Well, there was an opportunity on the drawing board with Opus on the one over by Point South Mountain, that site that was unfortunately never came to fruition, and it's now a Mark Hager deal. But there was an intent being made there to bring a probably IL-AL mix maybe product right adjacent to, separated only by a street from the Arizona Grand Resort now. And so it'll be interesting to see how the multifamily housing does there. But so yeah, there's a story to be told there. I think that if the older adults and their grandkids coming to visit them, and they can go hang out at the resort next door or stay there and go over and enjoy their food and beverage and come back home and not be more than a walk away. I think there's some synergy there. We see a lot of synergy in Agritopia with what Joe Johnson's created out there in Gilbert. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I know Joe, and I'm familiar with what he's done.
Yeah, and it's we're excited to see really a senior project emerge within a community that will be a shared community. I mean, right next door to the school and very much integrated part of that 500 home housing development.
Can we come back to this verticality idea? I think a lot of us in the town, when we think about these product types, we think probably 3-story minimums, 4 probable as we think about products in the area. But as we listened to the 4 of you describe projects, we heard some success story examples of single or 2-story products. So could you give us some more perspective on the relationship between successful projects and verticality and how that works?
The most expensive building that you can build is a 2-story.
The what?
The most expensive
Most
building
expensive.
that you can build is a 2-story. So because you've got the roof and you got the foundation. So if you can put 4 stories, especially with your price of land, I understand you don't do anything other than 2 stories, but you know that to do a senior housing project, it's going to be hard to make the numbers work unless you either get some tax credit money or you have some verticality.
Yeah, I mean, what you've heard from us is this is a great market, you know, wealthy residents. And then you've also heard what land is $1 million plus an acre, 2 stories only. We don't have any big sites. Is there a product that would fit? I mean, big sites, we don't have a 30 or 40 acre. We may have, well, I'm just saying, is there a product that we should be focusing our efforts on understanding, or you as developers say, you know, this is really the only economic thing that probably works?
And you, to kind of go backwards, you've had a request from the residents of Paradise Valley to bring senior living options into their neighborhood?
I mean, people talk about it. I mean, I don't know what our median age is here, but it's very wealthy. A lot of people have been there a long time, and they want to move, but unfortunately, they don't want to move as far north as you are.
And you see, for that wealth, you gotta give them something. Life care, John can do that through the continuum of care and a high-powered real estate model. But with that wealth, they can just add another room onto the house or bring in a.
Yeah, but they don't want to. They want the lot.
Yeah, here's the deal. After you reach a certain age, and we're minimum 1 acre zoning in
Yeah.
UP. After a while, you don't want that big yard. You don't want the pool.
Yeah.
You know, you feel like you have this whole entourage that you're supporting. Not that I even you're them.
And so, Eric, to answer your question, we go through a general plan process here that has lots and lots of citizen involvement. Okay? In fact, I think we do as much or more in terms of citizen involvement than most of the municipalities in the neighborhood. And the last one was about 2 years ago. And a part of that conversation was whether or not the town should consider adding this type of category. to its approved land uses. And I think if you go to the general plan, the language is something like explore the possibility or something. It's pretty soft. It doesn't say, yep, we're on it. But what it was driven by was not only the reality that Councilmember Schweikert just explained, but the other reality that the panel has identified, that if you are in need of that type of facility and you're a Paradise Valley resident, you have to look outside the boundaries. And that intuitively didn't seem right to folks, and that there ought to be, it's your 3 to 5 mile model, that there ought to be an alternative for people who live here and their loved ones to take advantage of this type of facility without having to move outside of town. And so those are the drivers that got us to today with the panel and an opportunity to learn more about the product types involved. So that's my answer to your question.
Yeah, and if I could just add one
Go
other
ahead.
thing, Jim, as someone who was involved in the general plan, another idea that was a part of looking further into the CCRC product for Paradise Valley was that the question always comes up whether or not our community is saturated with resort product. And so the CCRC product seemed like kind of a comparable product in terms of site requirements, traffic, density, structures, massing, and whether or not there could be a successful combination of meeting the requirements of our aging population here in our town, which is mostly what this would be about. This would not be about creating a CCRC or a set of products for people, moving into town from other places. I mean, really, the driving factor is to provide this amenity to our residents so that they do not need to move outside of the town. But in looking at, whether or not, because we do have some parcels of land that were slated for resort development, where resort development stalled because of economic conditions. And so the question is, well, can a CCRC really kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone, get redevelopment moving forward, and also serve as an amenity and a service to our residents moving forward?
Are those the 3 sites that are identified in this memorandum? Are those the resort sites or?
We have not settled on any sites at this point in time. The map that was included in the memo that went to council in April were 3 potential sites, just to get the discussion started. One of which is the property that Red Group has made application on, the 5-acre parcel, and then the Levy property was the other, which was is adjacent to an existing resort. There was a lot of discussion during the general plan update process about the possibility of some sort of senior housing option on that particular property, and the other one just came about more recently. But again, the council has not made any commitments or anything towards the land use.
It's not hard to decide where there's some potential spots in Paradise Valley because there's so many limited opportunities of any size. Obviously, you're in the midst of a residential community, you're not going to get R43 rezoned to that. So if you say, okay, what's the property in town that's overlaid for something other than R43, it's a very short list.
And I think so. If you thought about it in terms of gross square footage, you're looking at a 5 to 10 acre parcel, generally on the perimeter of the town.
Well, but I don't know that was contemplated in the general plan.
That part wasn't.
That was not. And the use of this type of product for that use as a buffer land use was not really the
No,
consideration.
I agree with that.
At that time, it was the 3, it was Cottonwoods, it was Ritz-Carlton, and it was Mountain Shadows. Because at that point, we didn't know what was going on in Mountain Shadows. So it was larger tracts of land that could facilitate a bigger facility.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's one of the migrations in the last 2 years, is that since we just agreed to a special use permit with Mount Shadows to reopen a resort, that site isn't as actively being considered. And the Ritz-Carlton site is still under consideration, but not for all of it, only a part of it, kind of thing. And then you get into what to me, this notion of the 5 to 10 acre parcel. whether it's transition or just the availability of a single parcel. I mean, you wind up with essentially the same as.
I think there's another force here at play too that we're not talking about, and that's how the state has set up things like assisted living and behavioral care. I think if you left it up to the developers, we could find a product that would fit perfectly. I mean, I could easily deliver a 2-story, very quiet, the density you want, the size you want, but there's a reason I'm at 10 bedrooms, because I'm developing assisted living homes as defined by the state. So anything over that, to deal with high land costs, my first move would be to go to multiple stories. But that's not the only force. The 10-bedroom rule is also another force, because going up another story, I'm over 10 bedrooms, and then I'm outside of residential building codes. I mean, I develop under residential code. My track's much easier than these guys, I think. We're developing cute little cottage homes, and they're easy to do. And we get a lot of advantages by being small like that.
And single story.
And single story, and there's very little neighborhood opposition.
And we have a lot of those in our town right now. I couldn't tell you exactly how many,
We couldn't tell you exactly.
That's the point.
I can tell you one, because it was advertised at
yeah,
the country store at Christopher Creek this weekend. They had brochures up for it.
yeah, but they're out. So I would guess that there may be as many as 10 or 12 in our community. And during the recent downturn, you can get some really big, very nice deluxe spec homes that you're able to acquire through a bank, short sale, something like that, and all of a sudden, you know, property that normally wouldn't have worked now can work. Because the basis is so much lower. So I think there's been several of those.
It's just
The difference is our assisted living home regulations, we have a spacing requirement of 1/4 mile between homes. So there are approximately 5 licensed assisted living homes in the town currently. And there's been inquiries about some additional ones recently, but they do have to be situated 1/4 mile from each other. I'm assuming Goodyear doesn't have that restriction.
It's not 1/4 mile.
Okay.
I think it was over half.
It's just a challenge to me, just to chime in a little bit, even on the 6 properties that you went out and looked at, 4 of the 6 were 4 stories. And I don't know, and I'm a resident of Paradise Valley, let me admit that. But I have a hard time understanding how you're going to do this less than 4 stories, given my advertised, but that's just me. I believe that.
I think what we've seen is, I don't know if the Silverstone model will ever be reproduced again because of the economy, but we're seeing less independent living and more of the skilled centers, skilled nursing centers. So, one thing that we're looking at is a smaller, independent living, but then we're phasing in, if the report says, it can withstand, 180 units, why not just build 60 units at a time? Because you don't want to, and let it grow, because you don't want our facility sitting vacant.
Well, you bring up a good topic, which is not specifically on our list, but we need. So, about a year and a half ago, your colleague Sharon Parker actually gave some of us a tour of the new facility out.
Yeah, I was there.
And I remember asking her, I said, well, you know a lot about the market absorption. What's your take? How many can the community absorb? And she said to me at the time, and she may have changed her mind, and that those large projects aren't as viable as they once were. Said, I think there's room for one in Paradise Valley or in the Biltmore, but certainly not both. So my next question is, how would the industry, how do we know about what an absorption, a reasonable absorption for our community with our demographics would be? How much is too much?
Well, that's something like the market feasibility study would produce. It does a 5 and 10 mile study that it evaluates again house households, incomes, population, age. It's a 75-page document, and that gets produced.
And how much does it cost?
Like the snapshot usually ranges in a $4,000 to $5,000 range, and then the in-depth is another $20,000 to $25,000. That's why you do the snapshot first, because it's a big undertaking.
See, I think one of the things that we should also be thinking about is you have some gentlemen that are, happy as heck to do a project in town, and then other gentlemen whose business model doesn't work that way. I think we have to clearly define what we mean by CCRC, because obviously we're speaking another language than what they are too.
But,
so,
I mean, for this study, we'll go in and say, do independent, do skill, do memory support, and it'll come back and say, well, it can, this community can handle a skilled and memory support, but it won't handle independent living. Because one thing is, people are starting to live longer. So that's why I'm saying earlier, a few minutes ago, we're seeing less independent living units and more of the skilled and memory support.
Another benefit of that report, I think, is another benefit of that report, I think. I assume we use the same company because you're using the term snapshot.
Yeah.
I'm real familiar with that, but I think another benefit that's in there is when you go for the $20,000 version of the report, it's a really comprehensive competitive analysis. For a developer, it's showing me all the different models that are nearby, where they are, how many beds, price range. So that information, while it's really useful for a developer, I think could also be really useful for a town in determining the inventory that's out there and knowing exactly where it is, what city it's in, what zip codes, what the demographics are for those developments, and trying to help get your thoughts around what you're trying to make and where, and how it's going to fit in with all those other products that are out there. There's really no good way other than a specialized firm like that to get that data.
And there's only
it
like
just
one or
happens
two
too
or
fast.
three in the country that does it. It's a special thing.
Well, that's gonna give you the penetration rates and other things. I mean, just to get a Claritas report on the demographics, and then you can look at the, age qualified, 85 plus households, and you can pull down the penetration rate from national. So, I mean, we can go back in the envelope without spending.
Or it may not be a CCRC, it may not be one big CCRC, it may be two of what Eric explained, independent assisted and memory care, maybe that instead, maybe the big project like I described out at Safewood is not the answer. That'll come out.
But what is the population of Judy?
13,000.
13,000 people. And your thought was you were hoping that you would build something that would just pretty much be absorbed by the percentage of that population.
Well, I think.
Is that why
Well,
Councilman Collins said?
it would meet their requirement, and it could be bigger than that, but it would at least meet the demand for local residents.
So that's like Sedona's 15,000.
Well, Eric, this started with a conversation, and it happens in a variety of different venues. People ask me, well, when will there be some transition housing in Paradise Valley? Well, transition is a pretty broad term. Does that mean smaller house, or does it mean really nice luxury house on a smaller lot? Does that mean part-time residents, walk and goes, or broad spectrum? And from the discussion of transition housing, which we have some few places in the town that have nice houses on 10,000 square foot lots. Then now we start talking about some coming up, Mountain Shadows, maybe parts of 5-star. So we think, what types of transition houses do we need to talk about? So that's, but we're right here just scratching the surface. We're just exploring really what the definitions are, so we can speak knowledgeably. Vice Mayor here was saying, we might want to consider doing our own snapshot, so we have an idea of how deep is our community. The last thing you want to do is have too much, and then with that, go back to our residents of our community and say, is this something interested? We're assuming that there's a demand in our community, especially we have some aging in our community, and I hear a lot of people say, I love Paradise Valley, I don't want to leave this community, I don't want to lose my connection, but I don't want to live in a big house. Can't live in a big house.
Also, now I look upon it as your 3 sites are right on the borderline of your town or community. Are you going to be pulling in from the border in town? You got Scottsdale, you got Phoenix.
I'm gonna guess that their demand is met. It's hard to just look at the geographic boundaries and say, are we meeting this demand or not? Because the industry and the demand and the supply doesn't look at it that way. It looks at it in terms of, like Stephanie was saying, the demographics. Are the right people there? How many? What's the income, age? And it's, to some degree, it's going to look at those geographic borders, but it's going to be more that moving blob of 5 miles, and it's going to go over the city boundaries in some areas. Sure. I'm just guessing. I would think that your demands are met. Now, if the population of Paradise Valley is saying, well, we want to be in the city, then that's a different story. Then you have a specific demand that has to be met.
And one thing that's going to be important is when we come up with some of these answers, we have to take it back to the community and find out if people want us to do this or don't. I know one gentleman has already threatened me with a referendum if we do this.
Not on my backyard.
Yeah.
Did you gentlemen do a snapshot on that property that you're contemplating?
Absolutely. And a full market study.
I don't think you can get financing.
Yeah, most of your lenders will require something.
Yeah, that's,
I was assuming the answer was yes. I just didn't want to.
It's what we're looking at is a $43 million development. So for us to spend $20,000 on a market study was imperative before we push forward.
Yeah.
We canceled projects just on the basis of, we've tied up land, ordered a feasibility study, and canceled the project because of those studies. Saved us probably
Get your
$9
mind
million.
on.
You know, you're really in a very similar boat to Sedona. I would connect with them and say, what are you guys doing? What would you study? Because they have 15,000 people. They've got one older retirement community, maybe 2. They've got a 5-acre parcel that's zoned and ready to go. And,
Well, my guess is they don't have Scottsdale and Phoenix.
Yeah, I was just going to say, they don't have any difference
communities around it too. They're thinking 80 units maximum,
Yeah.
and that's scaring them to death.
And we have a proposal out to them to do a market feasibility study up in Sedona.
And Sedona's already used to commercial development. You know, we literally have a handful of resorts and 1 animal hospital.
Different type of resort.
Yeah, it's an animal.
Just to be honest, in reference to these reports, an area of 13,000 people probably wouldn't hit our radar screen for 90-unit development. It's just not a big enough market.
Not unless it was really age.
Not unless it was an exact hit on age and
And you
income.
probably don't have 2,000 people in that
You're
age.
probably looking at
Oh, yeah, you do.
30 to
In this
60.
community,
Yeah, 2,000, so that would be
I would
like
say that
almost
in this
10%.
community, you would have 40%
80,
to
85
percent
plus is kind of where people
For a
have
care
to
center,
move somewhere.
Or your parents in West Virginia.
I would say that 40% is down there, age 7.
Since I guess we've heard today that we probably can't collect the sales tax.
Is he the
Our bed tax is what, 3.5%? Is that our bed tax, 3.5% there? roughly?
Yeah, right around.
So if an average unit was $4,000 or $5,000, 3.5%, you as developers struggle to get another $150 a month in lieu fee and your fees to rebate the town of Paradise Valley? Because it doesn't make sense for us if we don't get anything out of it. We say, and so the developers were now, like Mount Charles, they're all paying in lieu fees, which are like bed tax. And if you're paying, someone's paying $4,000 a month, another $150 a month, that doesn't sound like it's a deal killer, is it? Are we missing something? Is that a lot of money?
In our model, it's not. It wouldn't be, and in this model, because of the location, we have a premium.
Right.
the price for one of our units in Paradise Valley would not be the same as Point Green. So
Well, the market
I think
would-
we could absorb something like that.
But the
Yeah,
market
you
would
think-
demand a higher standard.
Yeah, so we could get it in.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Something.
We're all looking for profit companies.
I agree.
So I can just give you
We all
just back
try.
of the envelope of how people look at it financially. So if you're going to charge, let's say, $10,000 a month, that's $120,000 a year. With a 30% profit margin, if you're on the, if you have a range of AL and dementia, you might hit 38 to 42 if you have some IL blend in there. So let's just say AL and dementia, you're at 30% profit margin, you've got $120,000 in rental revenue per unit. So at 30%, you're gonna make $40,000 profit. If I sell that unit today in Paradise Valley, the cap rate on that would probably be a 7%. Okay, so if you take 40,000 divided by 7, that's my math skills, but that would tell you on the value that somebody could get in selling a unit. What is it? Who has a calculator?
Less than 6.
A little less than 600.
$500,000.
$500,000. So that means that for a developer to make a profit on it, they're gonna have to be able to build at under at 500,000 a unit or less. And so then you can back into what your density needs to be and other things. So that's kind of your VOTAC calculations.
We hear, when we're talking to residents, they're all concerned with ambulances, traffic, all the frenzy. Is that really the case? Is that really the case?
Not us parking.
Yeah. Or do you have rules that when an ambulance arrives or leaves, there's no sirens? I mean, can you do that kind of thing? I mean, that's kind of one of the big things that jumps. This is a quiet community. We don't have street lights here. It's dark. It's quiet. Got acre lots. People are saying, I want to hear the frenzy of these. Is that realistic, or is that just a myth?
Well, you're gonna have delivery trucks, you're gonna have.
No, I understand. We're used to that with
But
resorts.
you can disguise that pretty well. Yeah, I don't
Usually have a secondary entrance, because that an ambulance does, as we forbid something does happen, you don't want to bring them in through the main entrance, you put them into the back, and bring them in through the back, and a lot of times there are, you could put, you could usually, have the sirens go.
I mean, is there any,
In Tucson with 108 beds over the last year, I think we had 2 siren calls. I think I must have had it in my neighborhood.
And I
I
think
mean,
a lot
it's
of
just,
times.
it's not very.
I mean, is there some kind of meeting or something that says for every bed you have 1.6 calls a year or anything like that?
No.
No.
I will tell you, if they're in a facility, they're a lot less likely to need an ambulance than they are if they're in their home and they call. I mean, what's happening, if you have the 70-year-old, 40% of the population being 70-year-old, there has to be some ambulance calls right now.
Again, a lot of times, independent living, they check in, they do it sometimes, you can get a monitor device. If it goes to the front desk, it doesn't go to a call station, and then the front desk sends a person out to the independent living to check in on that resident. But they are a trained person that can evaluate, and if there is an issue, then they make the call. It's not like, if mom falls, she pushes the button and goes to the ambulance service, it goes to the front desk, and then it gets monitored and evaluated.
Your second question there with traffic is exactly what you're talking about. It
Yeah.
asks in comparison to resorts, and it's not even close.
Yes,
It's less.
Resorts are far more intensive.
I mean, you've got a pretty good chance of your health being intact when you're in a 10-bedroom home with 3 nurses living with you.
There's more on Camelback, the rest of these, right?
There are, limited data, yeah. So, since we're doing information sharing about interesting demographic factoids for TV, of the 12,820 people in the last census, slightly less than a fourth of them, 2,901, were 65 and over. We have a bigger 65 and over population than we do as an 18 and under population. Molly and I can probably find out from people who do this kind of stuff for a living, the breakdown between 65 and 75, 75 to 85, 85 and over. But it's a, I mean, I looked at these numbers for a lot of years. It's a reasonably big number for a town to be 65 and over. It's essentially we're a fourth under 18, a fourth over 65 after.
You know the statistics, how many are year-round residents versus?
Yeah, and then
That's for you.
That's your.
there's a long story to tell about how census counts our residents as year-round or not. But anyway.
Can I ask Mr. Todd a question real quick? Gary, we've heard some people ask, you know, is this just an entry to get apartments or multifamily into PV? What if your community wasn't successful? It could become apartments. Can we kind of talk about like parking ratios and things and how difficult it might be to presume that based on the way that they're constructed and the parking that's provided for senior housing versus conventional apartments?
Yeah, it just doesn't translate very well, quite frankly. I mean, the parking count is so much lower than what you would want on a market rate project. You know, market rate project, you're going to want 1.8 parking spaces minimum for it to work well, for it to function well for most anyone that manages apartments and doesn't have problems in the market rate industry. And here we're talking about a half of a parking space or something. You know, 0.5 of being manageable. So what do you do? How can you make that an apartment project? You can't. You won't have anybody living there. It just doesn't function well.
The flip side of that is, you know, we've got 49, 50 parking spaces and 2 residents that drive.
So you're, you know, operationally, you know, you probably know there's a market rate project in Midtown Phoenix that's relatively new that suffers greatly. They've started towing their own residents because they didn't provide that 1.8 per unit. You know, and yeah, some of the urban product you can drop to maybe 1.7, 1.65, whatever. But traditionally, in a location like this, you wouldn't do that. So you'd run into a lot of trouble. You have a hard time renting it, getting anyone to stay.
You know, we've had 2 meetings with the neighborhood group over there, and we have real positive feedback. Eric, one of the concerns was because you're going to be having people working there that don't live in Paradise Valley, do you screen them or concerned about, you know, potentially these people coming in? Can you talk a little bit about the workers from kitchen staff to housekeeping to your healthcare individuals and your screening process?
Yeah, as a matter of practice, I think most operators today, you know, will either assure a fingerprint check you have to for State Department of Health Services, but beyond that, a background check that is going to sort out, you know, the people that you don't want dealing with seniors, and those concerns are well founded. I mean, that's who's going to be taken care of, so, but it's going to be left upon the operator to, you know, to sort through that. But they're probably right. Not a lot of people that live in the PV are going to come to work there.
Do you do drug tests as well?
Yeah. Well, that would be, yeah, on an option basis, but rentals would be standard practice.
To be licensed, you have to have a criminal background check, otherwise you can't get licensed.
Yeah, and the caregivers are licensed by the state too.
They've got further licensing, the different, maybe the nurse has to be licensed, and the caregivers have to be licensed on certain nights. So, were you able to set their concerns aside? We
were, and again, it functions very much, in our humble opinion, like a resort. I mean, frequently they're referred to as, you know, a senior resort. Yeah. So with the weekly housekeeping and all of those things. So that they understood that.
It might be relevant to this group too. We ran into the reverse a little bit in Goodyear, where they were very concerned about our facility being converted into like a rehab facility or something along those lines. And I think the planners that were in the room with us that was probably their number one concern. We have zoning stipulations that we had to write in there that said we wouldn't sell it or operate it as anything other than assisted living homes.
That wouldn't pass the our code. That skilled nursing has much higher power code. So I didn't think it'd be possible. It'd have to be type 2.
But you're right, that would be a concern.
It wasn't something I was concerned with, obviously, but it was definitely something that the mayor and the council were concerned about.
I've learned a lot, and I don't know very much about this.
Exactly.
And I just have to share with everyone in the room, I would not be overly optimistic that this group here, the 5 of the 7 council we have, I don't think we can do a very good job of writing an ordinance for CCRC with full staff support, because I think when you agree, Molly, it's a pretty broad topic. It's say, oh, it's going to be X number of stories and then X amount of FAR, and you need this amount of parking, and your setbacks are. I think we're a ways away from being able to get our arms and community around what that would be, assuming there's a
And since there's obviously concrete definitions, I mean, I don't want to speak, but are you fully up to date on all?
Yeah, absolutely. And when we've been using the term CCRC, we understand that we're not going to get facilities that have that entire continuum of care. And in fact, when we've talked about it previously, we've described those different levels of care, but understanding that we might get a facility that just has AL, assisted living and independent living. It would be a combination and not necessarily all of the above. And to the mayor's point, I do want to let you know that I have been working with the applicant on a draft of a text amendment for a CCRC category that, we would like to get to the council sometime over, in the next coming months, so that we can start to see what this might look like, so we can try to address some of those concerns.
I just don't want to be over encouraging that a single applicant's going to come in and write our text amendment for us, because that's just not likely to happen.
And I'm kind of guessing that this is, to get full input from the community and stuff like this, is whether or not we want this thing. This is a year project at least, I would think. For one thing, we're not going to go out and on something this sensitive and try and gather community feedback for the next 4 months when half the people are gone. They don't like it when we do things during the summer.
The other thing, and staff and I talk about this a considerable amount, and I think today really demonstrated pretty clearly is that as part of that community outreach, that it might actually be beneficial to have some drafts of what legislation, if you will, or ordinance changes would look like, so that they can react to that, say this is what we're talking about or not talking about.
Right.
And before it gets to that point, maybe we can prevail on our panelists to get feedback about how solid the draft looks. But I just, as I sat here listening and participating in this group, the thought of just going out to the community in fall, or next spring even, and saying, so what do you think about a CCRC? Let's put them in a lot better place than we were at 345. There needs to be some kind of a bridge informationally to help the council understand where the community is.
But it sounds like what would work on a smaller parcel would be something way different that would work on a bigger parcel. So it would be a completely different, you brought one thing for one parcel, one thing for another parcel.
Right.
How would that?
Yeah,
so I don't know how you get one size fits all.
It doesn't sound like you have any
I don't know.
big parcels.
Well, it seems to me like we have to start and find out, or at least some of us need to start and find out if there's a need, if our residents identify that this is a valid need and a want. It could be a want and not a need. Right? It could be a legitimate land use in Paradise Valley potentially without a want or a need for residents. But I think that's a different decision to make on whether or not we add that to our general plan. If our residents don't need it and want it, I think those are two very important inputs to make that decision.
Sure. It's interesting to know that, because I was in the process with you when we went through it, I think that there's definitely a high interest. And if you look at what happened with the Ritz-Carlton project, I think that probably would have been the most expensive, certainly independent living facility for PD residents. I know one of the neighbors that I live in, they put money down and they want to.
Still might be a very expensive
But I'm kind of guessing that if when Paradise Valley was incorporated, if we didn't have those resorts here, we wouldn't be going out creating a classification for resorts. So the town is pretty slow to embrace and change on anything, as radical as new zoning category. So I just think we need to get I'm neither for nor against, but I just think we need to go out and get a lot of resident input. And I don't know, are you gentlemen, the two on the end here, are you residents of Paradise Valley? Okay. I didn't know if we had residents here, and I was just kind of interested in what their views would be.
Just on the panel.
I thought, we're obviously never beating down the door to do a project in Paradise Valley.
No, I will tell you, I've lived here for about 10 or 11 years in town, and my wife and I are already thinking the same thing. We don't want the 1 acre lot. We really like where we live, but so we're already passively looking where else could we live in a smaller condition. And it's not that we want to leave, but it's the only option. So it's tough to stay.
And I think that's what the mayor hears a lot. It's the only option is to leave.
And we don't like that.
Well, it used to be. Mount
want that to be
Shadows.
an option.
Mount Shadows will change that
Will
equation.
change that.
Ritz-Carlton will change that equation.
Yes.
I mean, that'll.
But they haven't changed yet.
Transitory housing.
Build them yet.
If I could make just one interjection, if you don't mind. My name is Ben Graff. I'm with Withey Morris. I'm here with Ray Group. The actual, from our perspective, the actual general plan amendment process that we've initiated this week, it includes the extensive amount of public input, public process, public meetings that you're all talking about. So I think we're confident that the application before you, which does include multiple changes to the general plan, it instigates the type of input that you want from your residents. So,
although I think that your application is a very localized example of that citizen participation and outreach.
Because you only have to reach out to like a
Well,
quarter.
no, actually, there's
You know,
two
if I-
applications, and the general plan text amendment is a town-wide application.
Oh, okay.
And so it would be for the entire community. It would be a community-wide discussion and outreach.
So that application has community-wide resident feedback on that?
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, on June 13th, the council will be asked to approve the citizen review plans for all the general plan applications.
because before anything can happen with our specific property, obviously the town council has to create the general plan category use for the entire town. So this is something that's going to engage the entire town on an entire town basis. The second step is specific to our property, but we have to engage the entire town.
And what we call it is a residence council, and, to get their input, get, put a board panel together and get their input, get the community input. So, that is very recommended to do, and we want to include the residents very much so.
Okay, thank you, Molly, for doing this.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all very much for your time. Very, very informative. And
Really.
you and Miss, you as well. Thank you.